Well, we're going to be studying the book of Revelation, and we've got until August 15th to get all the way through there. We get a wedding inside of there, so I'll be going one Sunday for a wedding. I've worked it all out, and I believe I can get an overview of Revelation done in that period of time and do it somewhat justice. So I'm looking forward to sharing with you the book of Revelation, which, quite frankly, is a really challenging book. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. It's a challenging book. In reality, I guess I spent over 40 years preparing for this sermon series. And even after 40 years of study and learning, I can make no guarantees that I've got it all together. I just can't. The best I can offer is to present my ever-growing understanding of this apocalyptic book. And I think in doing so, we're all going to learn together. Now, the views that I share are my own. Whenever I talk with the men about this series, I said there's going to be some stuff that people might think is really weird, but it's what I think is going to happen. And they said I could share what I think is going to happen as long as I told you it's what I think is going to happen. So I'm doing that from the very beginning. The views that I share are my own. It's the things that I think are going to happen. Some may seem just a little bit far out there as you listen to them. And some will make perfect sense. You'll say, yeah, that's probably what that's going to be. Please know, I am just a man, and my understanding is ever growing. Next year, I may feel differently than I do this year as I continue to grow in my faith. And here's the bottom line. You've always heard of these fancy names people have, these commentators that write books and lessons. The one thing you always want to remember is when someone is sharing commentary, it's because they're a commentator, just like you and me, a common old tater. This is where I am at this point and at this time in my life and in my understanding. Now, here's the catcher. You need to take responsibility for your own beliefs. You've got a responsibility to dig into the Word and learn for yourself. You need to study this book and develop your own understanding of the prophecy contained in it. That's what I've done, and I'm sharing the understanding that I have come to. But each one of us has a responsibility to learn and grow and develop in our relationship and in our understanding of Jesus Christ and His Word. The best I can hope to do is to share how I think things will unfold and encourage you to be vigilant as we face the future together. Now, the book of Revelation is clearly not a historical narrative. It's not telling the story of Jesus' life. It's not telling the story of Abraham. It's not telling the story of Moses. It's not a historical narrative. So it's not to be taken literally that this and this and this is going to happen here and here and here. And you have to understand that there's some things inside of this genre itself that screams caution. It's like a flashing light out there. This genre, that means the type of literature it is. It screams caution. Be careful. It screams this book is filled with imagery. This book is filled with symbolism. Now, that doesn't mean that it's not inspired. It is. It's the very Word of God. It doesn't mean that it's not true. It is true. It's just that it's filled with figurative, cryptic, symbolic, and even at times metaphorical truths. And that means it comes at you from all different directions, sharing truth in all different kinds of ways. And that reality means that our views of this book must not be held to dogmatically. In essence, if you don't like something that I share that I've come to understand or believe, that's okay because I don't know everything. And you don't know everything. So we have to agree to disagree whenever we have those differences of opinion in our understanding. And we need to move forward without too much dogmatism. It's like I can't say, I know this is what it's going to be, because quite frankly, it's an educated guess. It might be a well-educated guess, but it's still an educated guess. Friends, when we're studying the book of Revelation, at the very best, we're going to be out of our comfort zone. It's going to be uncomfortable to look at some of these things. Now, the first century Jews, the first century Christians were familiar with this type of literature, but we really are not. We don't have a whole lot of this kind of literature out there. In fact, probably the closest I could find in modern day times, and even then it's been around for a while, is the symbolism found in the Lord of the Rings or in the Chronicles of Narnia, where they tell a story with symbols and with different figures in order to bring out truths. It might be possible that those kind of literature, those kind of books today would sort of parallel the type of picture and symbolism that we have in the book of Revelation. But even then, they pale in comparison because some of the things in this book are wild. The bottom line is we may not fully understand some of the things we read in Revelation until they hit us square in the face. And I think when they do hit us square in the face, we're going to say, that's what Gary was talking about. Or that's what the Bible was talking about. That being the case, I want to begin this study as we get started with a summary of the most important things that we're going to learn throughout our look into the book of Revelation. And I'm going to share this week after week after week, so when we get out of here, we're all going to know it by heart. First, there is a Lamb's Book of Life. God tells us it's there. You can count on it. That's one truth that you need to go away with fully intact. There is a Lamb's Book of Life. Secondly, if your name is written and my name, if our names, let's put it that way, if our names are written in the Lamb's Book of Life, we get to spend eternity in heaven. Good news. You can count on that. Thirdly, if our names are not written in the Lamb's Book of Life, we're going to be thrown into the pit of hell. You can count on it. Those things are true. And fourthly, and the final one of this conglomeration, if you will, of facts that we need to grab a hold of and never miss, never let go of, since the first three things are unarguably true, we better make doggone sure that our names are written in the Lamb's Book of Life, because our eternity depends on it. With that said, let's start digging into the book of Revelation there in Revelation chapter 1. Today we're going to be examining Revelation chapter 1, verses 1 to 20. You should have already read that. We sent out an email this week encouraging you to read that. It's been placed out there beforehand in order that you would come, having already read the first chapter of the book of Revelation. I've simply titled this morning message, What Has Been? And you'll understand why as we go through our study this morning. Since you should have already read the book of Revelation, I think we'll go right in the book. I'm not going to read it again right now, and there's a reason for that. It's going to be summarized later on. The book itself, the book of Revelation, tells us that the one who put ink on paper or ink on papyrus or ink on animal skin, we're not told what he wrote it on, but he wrote it down. Whoever wrote this down for us, it says his name is John. That's going to be a familiar name. The purpose of this revelation is to provide encouragement, to provide hope for believers as they go through major trials while awaiting Jesus' return. Living as a Christian, it's never been all that easy. Everybody makes it sound like pie in the sky, by and the by, but the bottom line is it's challenging to live your faith every day. And especially as the world slides deeper and deeper down the hill of immorality. The purpose of this book is to keep us on track, to keep us focused on what is most important. Now, John and Jesus, they were really, really good friends. John followed Jesus for 3 years, hanging on his every word as he taught and as he worked miracles. He witnessed these miracles of Jesus up close. He wasn't sharing someone else's knowledge of it. He saw them for himself. He saw Jesus walking on the water and pulling Peter up when he took his eyes off and began to sink. He watched him heal the sick. He watched him make blind people see. He watched him make deaf people hear. He watched him make lame people walk. He watched him cast out demons. He even watched him raise people from the dead. When Jesus was crucified, John was there at the foot of the cross, evidently standing close to Jesus' mother, Mary. I can just imagine his arm around her, supporting her as she was going through this overwhelmingly painful event of watching her son die on the cross of Calvary. John was there. He stayed by the foot of Jesus' cross. In fact, Jesus looked down from the cross and he put John in charge of caring for his own mother. John, behold thy mother. Mother, behold thy son. In essence, John, take care of mama. You get the picture here? That's how close Jesus and John were. John is known as Jesus' beloved disciple. Jesus loved John with all of his heart. When John penned the book of Revelation, he was in exile on the Isle of Patmos. Now, I don't know if this story is true. It is, however, tradition. Sometimes it's good to be aware of the traditions of men because there seems to usually be a measure of truth inside of them. I am told that the emperor tried to have John boiled in oil. They put him in a big pot of oil. They tried to boil him, but the dude wouldn't die. It's like God protected him. Remember Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego? It is not impossible. But tradition says they tried to boil him in oil, and when they couldn't boil him in oil to shut him up and kill him, God protected him. They decided to send him off to an island where he wouldn't have anybody to talk to. So they sent him off to the Isle of Patmos. And he was there on that Isle of Patmos whenever the revelation of Jesus Christ was shared with him. Now, we must never forget, this isn't simply a book written by someone close to Jesus sharing their views. That's not what this is at all. It's the revelation of Jesus Christ. Have you got the picture here? It's the revelation that Jesus shares with us through the writings of John. It's Jesus' revelation, not John's revelation. It's the revelation, and I'm going to say it one more time, of Jesus Christ. I hope you've got that picture. Because since God himself is the source of this revelation, the source of what we find inside the book that John penned for us, you can count on it. While we may not be able to wrap our pea brains around all of it, it is reliable. It is the Word of God. But I admit to you, it can be just a little bit hard to unravel and understand sometimes. To have any chance of understanding this book that we call Revelation, we've got to understand some of the peculiarities surrounding this kind of literature. This unique type of writing, quite frankly, it can just be hard to wrap your mind around to understand. Apocalyptic literature is usually dualistic. That's a big old honking word. Dualistic. That means that it consists of two very different bodies of information. When you read the book, it consists of two very different bodies of information that we need to make a distinction between and understand. It makes a distinction between the sin and evil of this age and the glory that we'll experience when God calls us home. Those two things are put side by side so that we can view them and understand that the glory that is to come if we are faithful so far outweighs the trials of this world that there is no comparison. That's what we need to understand when we look at the dualism found in the book of Revelation. Apocalyptic literature has a lot in common with prophetic books. And in fact, as you read down through there in chapter 1, you find in verse number 3 that it's identified as a book of prophecy. The things that are shared are going to share truths about the future as well as truths about the past and the present during the time that John was alive. But apocalyptic literature also makes use of some very strange symbolisms, some things that we may not be able to grasp easily. We need to be aware of these characteristics, the characteristics of apocalyptic literature, in order to catch a glimpse of what John has recorded for us here in the book of Revelation. Even if we don't get it all, and that's a likely scenario, friends. Even if we don't get it all, we're still promised a blessing if we read the book and do our best to keep the things that are written inside of it. He doesn't say we have to understand it all. He says, do your best to understand it, and you will be blessed as a result. Since Jesus has already divided the book into sections, I think we ought to examine it based on his division. He literally lays it out there. The angel places his right hand on John. This is the right one. His right hand on John and told him not to be afraid. Wait for it. He then said, I am the first and the last. In the Greek alphabet, the Alpha and the Omega. I'm the beginning and the end. I am the living one. I was dead, and behold, I'm alive forever and forever. And I hold the keys of death and Hades in my hand. This angel that's sharing this vision with John is Jesus's mouthpiece. He's sharing the words of our Savior. I'm pretty sure that only Jesus fills this self-proclaimed description that's given by the angel that's talking on his behalf. It pretty much lays it out there. He wastes no time in getting to the point here in chapter 1. He tells John to get his quill and his paper or his papyrus ready because he needs to record what he's about to experience. He needs to write it down so that all generations can learn through his penmanship. I can just imagine the perplexed look on John's face as he hears the revelation that this angel's about to share, as he sees the vision he's about to place inside of his mind. Talk about apocalyptic language. The symbolism is out there. How do you understand? How do you know what he's trying to get across? John has no real reference to provide him with an understanding of the things that he's supposed to write down, that he's supposed to share. So he's left with the task of trying to describe the visions that God gives him in words and terms and examples of things that he's familiar with in order to help others understand what it is he saw. Here's the way he described what he saw in the vision that the angel brought to him from Jesus Christ. He said, I saw the 7 golden lampstands, and someone like the Son of Man standing in the midst of them. This being was dressed in a robe reaching all the way down to his feet with a golden sash around his chest. His hair was as white as wool, as white as snow, and his eyes were like blazing fire. His feet were like bronze glowing in a furnace. Are you starting to get the picture here? His voice was like the sound of rushing water. In his right hand, he held the 7 stars, and coming out of his mouth was a sharp, double-edged sword. His face was like the sun shining in all of its brilliance. Are you trying to picture this? Are you trying to get it inside of your mind? Can you imagine? When this was revealed to John, he fell flat on his face, and he laid there just motionless before God's representative. I'll tell you what, I think John was scared to death. I would have been. Might have been having to check some spots to see if I was wet or not. It'd be scary. And there he laid, God's messenger, revealed who he's representing. He said, I am the first and the last. He said, I am the living one. He said, I was dead, but look at me now. I'm alive and I'll be alive forever. We're repeating it because it's that important. He said, I hold the keys of death and Hades. In essence, he says, I am the risen, glorified Lord. And I've got a message for you. A message that you need to hand down to others. Then he got straight to the point. Jesus wants John to act as his scribe and write down absolutely everything that he tells him to. There's going to be some things that he says, don't write this down right now. They're not ready for it. But other things he says, take it down, get it, make sure people can understand it. He's about to reveal to him some overwhelming truths. And he even gives him an outline to follow, the same one we're going to follow as we tear this book apart and look at it. He tells John to write down what he has seen, what is now, and what will take place later. I'm guessing that right about now, John's beginning to connect the dots and is beginning to recognize that he has a huge undertaking in front of him. Let me share a Snowden paraphrase of what I think John might have been thinking right about this time. It's what I would have been thinking if I were in his shoes. Okay, Jesus, I've seen you standing there among those 7 lampstands and holding those 7 stars. Now, don't get me wrong, Jesus, you look amazing. And holding those stars in your hand, that is really cool. But here's the thing, Jesus, what does it all mean? Can't you just imagine? Wouldn't that be what you were thinking? Okay, I see it. I can describe it to you, but what does it all mean? This is where the rubber hits the road in chapter 1. Jesus takes a few moments to unravel the mystery of what John is seeing in his vision, of what John is experiencing. He tells John that the 7 stars are symbols of the angels or the messengers of the 7 churches in Asia Minor. Just lays it out for him. That's what it is. We don't have to have any question about that. Jesus said this is what it means. He tells John that the 7 lampstands symbolize the 7 churches in Asia Minor. It's a symbol of the churches themselves. No question. Jesus told him what it means. There's no ambiguity now. John's got it. And by now, I'd imagine he's got his quill and his ink ready. And he started to write. Jesus has been laying the groundwork for a major transfer of prophetic, apocalyptic information, and John is ready to get it down. He's going to be Jesus' scribe, if you will. What an amazing honor, but also what an overwhelming responsibility it would be to write down the very words of God. John was truly loved and he was truly trusted by Jesus. It's up to John to get Jesus' words put on papyrus, put on paper, if you will. In the book of Revelation, John's going to outline Jesus' outline for each and every one of us. He's going to tell us what has been. He's going to tell us what is during his time frame. And he's going to tell us what is yet to come. That, my friends, is our time frame. He's going to lay it all out there for him. What we've been reading is John's attempt to faithfully record what he's seen and what he's heard. In doing so, he gives us a word picture of the risen Lord that's simply amazing. Can you imagine looking into the face of the risen Lord? Let's sit back. Take a moment to visualize what this might have been like for John as we come to a conclusion today.
Revelation